Hello, hello! I'm Jordan and welcome back to my knitting channel, Andalusia Knits. And today I have a tutorial for you for a technique that you might actually already know how to do and not realize it. So the longtail cast on is a very popular cast on method. It's typically one of the first ones that we learn as knitters, but it also has a secret second life as a provisional cast on. And so today in this video, I am going to walk you through how to do this provisional version of the longtail cast on. And after that, we're going to take a look at some examples and scenarios where this provisional cast on might come in handy. So for those unfamiliar with provisional cast-ons in general, these are cast-on techniques where we will go back and unpick the cast-on edge at a later point in the knitting. And there are quite a few different ways to do a provisional cast-on, but I really like this one in particular because, like I already mentioned, this is a technique that many knitters are already familiar with. It just takes a little bit of extra learning to figure out how to make this provisional. And because a lot of the popular provisional cast-on techniques today call for additional items like a crochet hook or barber cord. And while those are absolutely easy to source, I just really appreciate that this cast on doesn't ask you to like have any extra tools that the average knitter might not already have. And so in terms of tools that you're going to need for this, the list is very small. You're going to need your knitting needles and your yarn, and specifically you're going to need 2 strands of yarn. So the traditional longtail cast on is done using only 1 strand of yarn, but for this provisional version, you're actually going to need 2 strands of yarn. And I recommend using 2 different colors of yarn because when it comes time to actually unpick the provisional cast on, it's going to make it much easier and much faster to see exactly what needs to be unpicked in that cast on edge. And so then in addition to your needles and yarn, a tapestry needle is really all you need. And even that, you can get away with unpicking this with your knitting needles as well if you don't have a tapestry needle. One last thing before we begin. In the tutorial, I am demonstrating the cast on in the round, but it is absolutely possible to do this flat as well. So at a certain point, I'm going to ask you to find the end of round. And if you're working this flat, just go ahead and look for the end of row as opposed to the end of round. So the first thing we need to do to create this provisional cast on is make a slip knot, and we're going to use both strands of yarn to create this slip knot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then it is just a matter of placing it on the needle like so. And the really nice thing about this particular variation on the longtail cast on is that it is not actually a longtail cast on. Because you're using 2 strands of yarn, you don't actually have to estimate how much yarn you're going to need for this particular technique. You can just start right at the end of the yarn and not worry about using too much or using too little. It's probably the most convenient thing about this cast on. One important thing to note about the slip knot is that it does not count towards your stitch count total. So once you have your stitches cast on, you're actually going to slide this off the needle and undo it. So make sure when you're counting stitches initially, don't include the slip knot in your count. Now it's time to start working the longtail cast on, and this is going to be pretty much the longtail cast on as you know it, except we're going to be putting our thumb around color A, the green yarn, and our index finger around color B, the purple yarn. And from here, it's just a longtail cast on. We're going to take the needle and come underneath the green yarn and through the loop, and then come around the purple yarn and from right to left, bring the needle through it, and then bring the needle one last time through the green yarn. And there is your first stitch. And so I'll show that one more time. We're going to take the needle and come down underneath the green yarn and through that loop, and then swing around from right to left through the purple, and then bring the needle through the green one last time, and there is the stitch. And I'll show you just a couple more in case you want to see that a few more times. Through the green, purple, green. Green, purple, green. And so as I've done a couple stitches now, you'll notice on the needle that the stitches that are wrapped around the needle are in purple, but then the horizontal bars that are right underneath the needle are in the contrast green color. And so from here, you're just going to cast on however many stitches you need for your particular project. And like I said, keep in mind the slip knot that we did at the beginning, that should not count towards your stitch count. So once you have the correct number of stitches cast on, just go ahead and take that slip knot and slide it off the needle and undo it. And that's it. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Okay, so when it comes time to unpick the provisional cast on, the first thing you need to do is locate the end of round. And this is very easy to do because you'll see that the beginning of round has these 2 yarn tails coming out of it, and the end of round will have this 1 single yarn tail coming out of it. And so once you've located the end of round, go ahead and notice how in the contrast color in the cast on, it creates these horizontal bars of yarn underneath the columns of stitches. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is find that horizontal bar underneath the end of round, and you're going to want to just yank it out, just like that. Easy as that. And so when you do this, this will not actually produce a live stitch yet. So you don't have to worry about catching anything on a needle yet. That first yank is purely to just get the ball rolling. Now that we have unpicked that first bar, you will want to go ahead and get your needle ready, because the next thing that we unpick is going to create a live stitch that will need to be put back on the needle, or it's going to unravel. So after that first horizontal bar, you are simply going to locate the next horizontal bar and insert your needle underneath it and give it a yank like last time. However, now you will see we have a live stitch here, right here. This thing is going to unravel if we don't get it back on the needle. So you're just going to simply slip that onto the needle like that. And that's it. So now I'm just going to continue to work my way around the cast on edge from end to start in reverse order. And I'm going to unpick these horizontal bars. And as I do, that is going to create new live stitches that I'm going to slip back onto the needle. So in terms of scenarios where the provisional cast on can really come in handy, there are basically 2 main ones. And the first scenario is when you are looking to graft your starting stitches to some other set of stitches. So to graft stitches, you need 2 sets of live stitches. And so the provisional cast on allows you to create live stitches from wherever you started knitting and attach those to some other point. So I'm actually releasing this tutorial in conjunction with my pattern, the Chosen One Cowl. And this cowl is knit as a tube in the round, and then you graft your starting stitches to your end stitches to create the finished cowl. And the second scenario where you might want to use a provisional cast on is if you are very dead set on having both ends of a flat project look exactly the same. And I am right there with you. I am just as much of a perfectionist about this as anybody. And so what you do is do the provisional cast on, knit your project like normal, do your preferred bind off, and then come back and unpick the provisional cast on, pick up those starting stitches, and do the exact same bind off that you did for the finishing stitches. And that will ensure that both ends of the project look exactly the same. And I'm sure there are more scenarios out there than just these 2 scenarios, but these are the main ones that you're going to encounter in terms of needing to use a provisional cast on. One final warning about this provisional cast on and every provisional cast on that you'll find out there. The number of stitches that you have after you have unpicked that provisional cast on is going to be 1 fewer than the number of stitches you cast on. And that sounds kind of crazy, and I won't get into the exact specifics, but it has to do with just the nature of the path that the yarn follows as it creates the stitches. When you unpick that initial row, you're going to have 1 stitch less. So if you're in a scenario like with grafting where you need a very specific number of stitches to graft to another set of stitches, make sure to cast on 1 extra stitch when you do this cast on initially, so that you'll have the correct number when you come back and unpick the cast on later. Alrighty, well that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you got something out of this tutorial. If you like knitting videos like this or knitting videos in general, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss an upload from me. But I think I'm going to leave it at that today, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!